you are also the player of the character. And when you realize that you're the player of the character, then you can control the character, you can change the character. And when you change the character, you change your frequency. And when your frequency changes, the reality around you changes. You're in a different level, a different dimension in this game of life. So for the purposes of this video, we'll call this your higher self, because it's just an easy term to remember. Your higher self is basically your God consciousness, your creative consciousness. And it's based on your alignment, your truth, your joy. And it's not based on anything to do with the material world, okay? It's not created. It's creating based off its truth, its true desires, and not off external reality. When you start tapping into your higher self, you begin to realize that you have the qualities being one with Source, with God, with the divine. You have the same qualities as the divine because you have a portion of that creative consciousness within you. And you can see this because that creative consciousness is infused into everything that we call reality. But the material world is not creating anything, okay? So you're the creative being. And when you start tapping into your higher self, you can start realizing that. And you have the same qualities as the divine because you are a fractal of the divine. So you are infinite, you are creative, you are abundant and whole. That's your true essence. But the ego, because it's based and created by a material world that is rooted in lack and limitation, the ego self is limited, is operating from lack, and is reactive and created by circumstance. So this material world that has these characteristics, it is basically an illusion. It's not the full truth of reality. It's less than 1%, as we know. And so the ego self is based off something that is not the full picture and of things that are illusory and temporary. If we look at the story of Exodus in the Bible, that was basically a code. And the slaves in Egypt, they were not slaves in the physical sense, but in terms of they were slaves to the ego, the desires of the ego. And Moses came to free them from that enslavement. So all of that was metaphorical. And even if we look at Christ, I mean, Christ descended to this 3D reality, but did not basically base his self off the illusions, the limitations, the lack, the circumstances of physical reality. He descended, he shared the word of Source, the word of God. And, he didn't feed into the worries, the limitations, all of that stuff. So he maintained a state of consciousness which was above the illusions of physical reality. And he was capable of then performing miracles in this physical world, what we would perceive as miracles, but it was not miracles for him because he had the state of consciousness for which that was just normal. That was his frequency, and that was the state he was able to operate in. Anything that goes against, basically, you being able to access that creative state of consciousness is what could also be known as the Antichrist. In the Kabbalah, they call this the Satan, okay, in ancient spirituality years and years ago. The ego self, that ego-driven reactive voice that's reacting to the external world, that is like what Satan actually is. That is the Antichrist. It's that voice that's stopping you from reaching your highest frequency, your highest state of consciousness, and that's keeping you trapped as a slave to the physical circumstances. So the higher we rise in the scale of consciousness, the more our frequency expands and our awareness expands, the more we can see the truly illusory nature of this finite reality. But it's not until we return to the source that the vision, the illusion falls away completely and we're able to actually see the truth and the full picture. But in the meantime, how can you use this to bend your reality? You want to know when you're operating from ego, and you want to know when you're operating from alignment or from your higher self. You can use your frequency to become invincible to the traps of the lower planes. So this is the things that are based in logic and based in materialism. Now, you can obviously still want material things in your reality, but you should be questioning yourself. Is this coming from alignment? Is this coming from following my truth and my joy? Or is this coming from some ego satisfaction, some sort of validation? So the traps of the ego are to do with your lower energy centers, and you essentially will be stuck in a lower frequency, in a lower state of consciousness, the more you chase these things. So, chasing validation, chasing approval, chasing like your value, tying that to your achievements, tying that to status, tying that to gain. Those are always going to be lower frequencies. And how you start raising up is you start practicing unconditional love towards yourself. You don't base your value, your worth in what result you have physically, externally. You realize you are valuable and worthy because you have life force energy running through your body, and you are the conscious creative being who's creating this whole experience. Step 1 is you stop being created by reality. Okay, you realize you are the creative being, you have creative consciousness, and you allowing reality to tell you who you are, how valuable you are, what you can have, is like you trying to say that to God. Do you know how ridiculous that is? So if you want your frequency to be invincible, the first thing you have to do is you do not allow your state, your belief system, your emotions, your identity to be determined by physical reality. You determine those things, knowing you are the creative being. The second thing you do is you prioritize your state. So get really, really clear on what are you thinking about, what are you focusing on, and most importantly, how do you feel? You should be particularly prioritizing your joy, your alignment, the things that light you up. And it doesn't matter if they don't make logical sense, because if you get into a state that is open, calm, non-reactive, abundant, and confident, because you know your true nature is infinite, then no external circumstance can sway you, okay? When you start operating from this frequency, when you've decided that you're not going to keep waiting for a circumstance in order to feel a certain way, you're going to let yourself feel it now. All the circumstances that resonate with a different state of feeling, with the feeling state of stress and limitation, they don't resonate with you anymore because you've changed your frequency. So they simply fall away. This is why certain people in certain fields, they might have, things going wrong all the time in their business. They might have unexpected bills, unexpected problems coming through all the time. It's because it's in their state. They're not open, they're not calm, they're not non-reactive, they're reactive. They're expecting the worst. They're expecting bad things to happen. They're saying, well, this has to happen because this happened to my other friend. And they're accepting the terms and conditions of the world and the limitations of the world. And so that's part of their frequency, and then it's part of their experience. You have to step outside of what the majority are doing and let yourself be the one who has it differently. Let yourself be the anomaly, and you lead that dance with your energy. So this is why I'm saying your frequency is like an invincibility cloak against the lower vibrational things in reality, because when you don't resonate with them, they're not going to be in your experience anymore, so you don't have to keep worrying about them. Which brings me to my next point. You do not assume the role of the divine. What do I mean by this? The only thing you're actually responsible for is your state. You're not actually responsible for how the materialization that's going to correspond with that state will actually happen for you in reality, because everything is already created. So you haven't created all of these possibilities, okay? The infinite all-knowing mind has. It wasn't you. So you, in your limited perspective that you have as a human being, even when you're in your highest state of consciousness, you don't know everything. You don't have the consciousness of the all. You haven't experienced this possibility that you're aligning with yet. And so for you to try to figure it out in your logic, you're always going to stay limited, and you're always going to keep yourself trapped in a lower state. Surrendering the how, surrendering the way that this thing is going to unfold for you is how you stay open to it unfolding in the best possible way. We see this in the Bible. It says, with man, this is impossible, but with God, all things are possible. Man being your lower limited perspective and God being source, the divine, everything is already in existence. All you have to look after is your energy, and then you let it unfold as it needs to. Because if you keep taking actions in your lower dimensional perspective, you don't know if they're going to be the right actions. The only time that you get up and you start taking physical action is when you get intuition that's in alignment with this energy, because that's the action that's going to align you with the reality that resonates with this energy. You do not sacrifice your state because you're trying to force something to change in your reality. Your state is always your number one priority. So you align that, you let go of the how. And when you get intuition to take aligned action, you can take it from that energy where it feels good, it feels aligned. Other than that, you don't interfere. You don't get into the energy of chasing, of wanting, of trying, because that is not the energy of having. So part of your invincible frequency is feeling like you already have everything you need, not feeling like you need to chase, and allowing yourself to be happy with feeling the feeling states corresponding to your desired reality and letting that be enough. Once you set your state, once you set your energy, you let go and you let God. And that is how you remain in a frequency so strong